Alright guys, this is Hassan once again. Today we'll be talking about the trigeminal nerve. This will cover questions 12 through 14, and I'm going to divide these videos into 3 separate videos. One video per nerve or branch of the trigeminal. Okay, but before we begin discussing the actual branch of the trigeminal, first we're going to discuss the different nuclei. Okay, and you have to realize that the trigeminal nerve has 4 nuclei. Okay, now we're going to talk about what type of nuclei there are in order to understand its purpose, okay, and the way the trigeminal nerve actually works. So you have 3 somatosensory nuclei, okay, and what somatosensory actually means is basically touch, right? And you have 1 bronchiomotor nucleus, and bronchiomotor is a special term for neurons that are responsible for muscles of the facial expression, and also neurons that are responsible for the position of the neck, the jaw, the larynx, and the pharynx. Okay? Let's move down and talk about our first somatosensory nucleus, and that is our principal nucleus. Now, just imagine a principal of a school, in order to receive that position, one has to be very professional and at the same time very cordial. Now imagine a principal shaking your hand. Do you imagine him squeezing it, or do you imagine him having a very light touch, right? So a good way to remember a principal nucleus is someone shaking your hand very lightly. So therefore, principal nucleus will be responsible for receiving impulses of light touch and vibration. And that's basically what epicritic means, okay? Then your second somatosensory nucleus, okay, is going to be the spinal nucleus, okay? And the way I remember this one, spinal nucleus, what it's responsible for, if you think of your spine, and if you think if anything ever went wrong, something in the alignment or any injury, it would be very painful. So remember that the spinal nucleus is responsible for receiving impulses of pain and temperature, okay? And that's what protopathic means. Now our last somatosensory nucleus is our mesencephalic nucleus, okay? Now the mesencephalic nucleus is in, I believe, the caudal cross-section of the midbrain. We're going to be looking at that later anyway, don't worry. But the mesencephalic nucleus is responsible for the proprioception of the face, okay? And basically that just means the feeling of the positions of the muscles, okay? That proprioception, that's basically what proprioception means, just awareness and positioning, okay? And specifically, the mesencephalic nucleus will be responsible for the proprioception of the face. Now, we have one more nucleus, our last nucleus, which is bronchiomotor, and that's going to be motor mascatory muscles, okay? So the motor mascatory nucleus is going to be responsible for the motor innervation of the motor mascatory muscles, okay? So now, let's take a look at the cross-section. And sorry guys, I think I just said right now that the mesencephalic nucleus was in the caudal cross-section of the midbrain. That's incorrect. What I meant to say was the rostral section of the pons. So here we go. Let's take a look at the cross-section, a rostral cross-section through the pons, okay? And we're going to look at the different nuclei. Now in this cross-section, first of all, you can differentiate the rostral cross-section because you know that the trigeminal nerve is going to emerge from it. You can also identify this cross-section by knowing that you can see the 4th ventricle, okay? And those are the main bits, okay? So let's take a look at the nuclei. Now, if you take a look, right? Now you have your principal nucleus, somatosensory. You have your second somatosensory. Now they're colored the same color, so that's how you'll know that's somatosensory. Okay, so this will be your principal. this will be your mesencephalic, which I was just saying right now, and you see this pinkish reddish one, that'll be your motor mascatory nucleus. Now if you look, one will be asking, where's the third somatosensory nucleus? Okay, and if you guys remember, the third one was the spinal nucleus. That's going to be actually in the caudal section of the pons. Okay, it's going to be in the caudal cross section of the pons, and it's going to be in the same color. It's going to be right here. Okay, all right. So now that we've looked at the cross sections, let's actually reference the book. Okay, just to get another view at the nuclei. Let's take a look at page number, I think somewhere 120. Okay, so let's first of all, let's just take a look at the nuclei. So let's take a look at the rhomboid fossa. Let me just adjust this camera. Okay, now if you look right here, we have right here, I'm going to guess this is going to be the principal nucleus. Okay, now if you continue up, you're going to find the mesencephalic nucleus right here, and if you continue down, all the way down the spinal tract, you're going to also have the spinal nucleus right here. Okay, so basically a good way to remember it is on the for sensory nuclei in the entire brainstem. Okay, you can just think that the somatosensory nuclei are a continuation of each other. So inferiorly you have the spinal nucleus, and you continue upwards, you're going to run into your principal nucleus, and then you continue upwards and you're going to run into your mesencephalic nucleus. Okay, so that's a look at the rhomboid fossa, and there's just something else I wanted to show you before we begin. Actually discussing the first branch of the actual trigeminal nerve. You have your 3 branches of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, now you have your ophthalmic, which we'll be discussing in this video, and you have your maxillary, and you have your mandibular. Okay, so this is just a good way of understanding what the trigeminal actually receives in terms of sensory innervation. Okay, now let's actually begin the first cranial nerve. The first branch of the trigeminal. That's going to be our ophthalmic. Now I've already made the scheme because it's quite hard to make whilst you're filming. Now I want to state for all branches of the trigeminal that all of them have to pass through the cavernous sinus in order to go to their destinations or their final destinations. Okay. Now in one of my previous videos I had mentioned that only the mandibular and maxillary branches of the trigeminal pass through the cavernous sinus, and that was incorrect because I later found out that all 3 branches of the trigeminal actually pass through the cavernous sinus. Okay, so here we are. We have the ophthalmic cranial nerve. The ophthalmic branch of the trigeminal, and the ophthalmic has 3 branches. Okay, you have your nasociliary, you have your frontal, and you have your lacrimal. Okay, now a good way to remember this is you make an acronym, and the acronym is NFL. Now in the United States you guys have this sports organization, huge, and it's very famous, and for me I just remember NFL, and remember that those are the 3 branches in the those represent 3 branches in the ophthalmic branch of the trigeminal. So as I said before, the ophthalmic is going to pass through the cavernous sinus. It's then going to give off a tentorial branch, a recurrent tentorial branch, okay, and then it's going to branch off into its 3 branches. Okay, now as you see, you have this dotted line, right here. And that dotted line basically represents the superior orbital fissure. Okay? Now, the ophthalmic nerve first divides into its 3 branches, and then they all go through the superior orbital fissure. Okay? Now let's take a look at nasociliary. Okay? Now the nasociliary has 5 branches. Okay? Now these 5 branches, there's another way to remember this, but I think just with practicing and going over this branch, you're just going to remember it. Okay? So the way I remember it is PAILC, P-A-I-L-C, okay? But like I said, it's very important to look at different visual aids and look at different books in order to just have the memory, have your memory a picture or something that, and you'll just be able to remember all these branches. So firstly, you have the posterior ethmoidal, okay? Now your posterior ethmoidal branch is going to innervate the ethmoidal and sphenoidal sinuses. Then you're going to have your anterior ethmoidal branch. Now the anterior ethmoidal branch, the way it works is it's going to go through the anterior ethmoidal foramina, okay, and if you guys remember, it was on the ethmoid bone, and it's going to go through the anterior ethmoidal foramina. It's going to go through the cribriform plate, and then it's going to enter the nasal cavity. Now once it enters the nasal cavity, it's going to give off its terminal branch, which is the external nasal branch, as you can see I've written down. And the external nasal branch is responsible for innervating the skin of the tip and the dorsum of the nose. Okay? Now I is going to be your infratrochlear branch, and the infratrochlear branch is going to go to the medial corner of the eye. Okay, that's what's going to innervate. And then you have L, you have your long ciliary nerves, okay, and they're going to go to the eyeball. Now, let me just get out one of my books just to show you guys, because this took me a while to understand. But if you guys look here, let's see if you can find it. Right here, it should be right here. So let me just adjust the camera one more time. Now, okay, you can't really see the eyeball here, so we're going to have to look in a deep layer of the orbit. If you see number, I think, let's see. Look at number 32, okay. It's right there. It's actually kind of very hard to see. 32 is right here. This is your long ciliary nerve, okay, and it's gonna go to the eyeball. Okay, it's gonna go to your eyeball, and then the other branch that I was talking about after the long ciliary nerve, you have your communicating branch. Okay. To the ciliary ganglion. So from the nasociliary nerve, okay, you have your communicating branch to the ciliary ganglion. So I think that would be 28. If you look again, okay, that'll be 28. And I am correct. Okay, so the ciliary ganglion is 27. It lies on the optic nerve. Okay. And then you have 28 is the nasociliary root, which connects the ganglion to the nasociliary nerve, and the nasociliary nerve is going to be 29, and you can see all its different branches. Okay? All right, now let's continue. So now we're going to talk about the frontal branch. Okay? The frontal branch, now the frontal branch is going to give off 2 branches. It's going to give off the supratrochlear nerve. Now, if you saw before, we had something called the infratrochlear nerve or infratrochlear branch. Just remember, when you think of trochlea, just think medial corner of the eye or medial part of the orbit. Okay, so just remember, infratrochlear and supratrochlear innervate the same area, which is the medial corner of the eye. Then, for frontal, you have not only the supratrochlear, but you have the supraorbital. Okay, and the way the supraorbital branch works, it goes through the supraorbital notch, and then innervates the conjunctiva, the upper eyelid, and the skin of the forehead. Okay, and that's going to be your frontal branch. Now, last but not least, you have your lacrimal. Lacrimal branch goes straight to the lacrimal gland, okay, and the lateral corner of the eye, okay. So don't forget that most of these branches are all in their name. So just try to think of it logically. Lacrimal nerve is going to go to the lacrimal gland, okay, and that, guys, is your ophthalmic nerve. But I would advise you guys to look in page 345 of the locomotor themes in topography section. Okay. Also, you guys can look, I believe it's on page 44. Let me just check for you guys. Yeah. So if you guys look on page 44, you have your ophthalmic and maxillary nerve, and it just shows you the pathway. You know what, we might as well go through it real quick. You have your ophthalmic nerve, okay. It's going, like I said before, it divides into its 3 branches, okay. By the way, guys, I forgot to mention something. The nuclei, they all form a trigeminal ganglion, okay, and the trigeminal ganglion, it's important to say that it lies on the Meckel's cave, which is the apex of the petrous part of the temporal bone, okay. Then it divides into 3 branches, okay, and the ophthalmic, as it's given off right here, is going to divide into 3 branches and then go through the supraorbital fissure, okay. And let's see if you can follow this. So right here, now, as I said before, although you cannot see the cavernous sinus, you know that's going to go through it, and it's going to give off its tentorial branch, okay. After it gives off its tentorial branch, this one is going to be its frontal branch, and if you follow it, it's going to give off the supratrochlear and supraorbital. More medially, it will be the supratrochlear. Like I said, it's going to go in the medial part of the eye. And you see this little notch right here. I believe that's going to be the supraorbital notch. The supraorbital nerve is going to go through it and innervate the skin, the forehead, the upper eyelid, and the conjunctiva. As you can tell, this nerve, if you follow it, it's going to give off a few things. What is that exactly? I believe, okay, that's going to be the lacrimal nerve. Okay, well, I believe this is going to be actually the nasociliary, because, you know, this is the communicating branch, okay, right here. Okay, so it's a bit confusing, so you have to go through it, but I'm going to make this very simple. You have your frontal, okay, supraorbital, supratrochlear. Supraorbital goes to the supraorbital notch. Supratrochlear goes to the medial part of the eye. Then you have your lacrimal nerve. It's going to go to the lacrimal gland, okay, and the lateral corner of the eye. And then you're going to have your nasociliary, and remember the nasociliary has 5 parts. It's going to give off the anterior ethmoidal, the posterior ethmoidal. It's going to have a nasociliary root to the ciliary ganglion, and you can see it's right there. Let's see what else. There's going to be infratrochlear. Can you find the infratrochlear? We can. It's right here. Okay, so basically you just have to follow the nasociliary, and your infratrochlear is going to be right there. Okay, and then you have your long ciliary nerve. You can't see it because the eyeball is not here, but the long ciliary nerve would go to the eyeball, okay? And that is your ophthalmic nerve. And guys, like I said, this is going to be on page number 44 of the Dentures Atlas. Guys, please use different pictures because it definitely helps remembering in the exam. when you have visual aid that has, if you looked at different visual aids, it's just going to be easier to understand. And once you understand something, it's really hard to forget. Before I end the video, I just want to say that also on page 121 you have an entire scheme of the trigeminal nerve, and you can see like the entire layout of the nuclei from the brainstem. You have your principal, you have your mesencephalic, and you have your spinal. Okay, and they're all going to form, and you have your bronchiomotor, which is red. They're all going to form, they're going to go to the trigeminal ganglion, which lies in the Meckel cave, the petrous part of the temporal bone, and, it's going to give off the ophthalmic. Okay, so we've talked about the first branch. In the next video, we're going to talk about the maxillary, and after that, we're going to talk about the mandibular.